The insult landed before Zara Monroe even sat down. "We're not running a language club," said Grant Ellison, the Alabaster Marble CEO, whose office screamed dynasty. He skimmed her resume for a heartbeat, then let it slide from his fingers into a silver trash bin as if he were flicking away lint. 9 languages? Cute. We need doers, not dictionary collectors. The words were smooth, practiced, and sharpened by a smile that never reached his eyes. Zara kept her back straight, fingers pressed to a leather portfolio that had cost 3 months of cafeteria shifts. She had promised herself, no tears in the rooms that expect them. She had learned early that rooms like this test your posture first, your competence second. Daughter of a Jamaican contractor and a Moroccan nurse, she grew up translating leases, hospital forms, and the unspoken power games of New York City. Language, to her, was not decoration. It was survival, a key ring of 9 blades that could open doors or cut rope when you're tied down by people who don't know your name. "If you'll consider my qualifications," she began, voice level. Ellison waved at the door. "Security will see you out. We're done." The lobby's mirror-bright floors returned her reflection in cruel multiples. Through glass you could see the city he owned. Banners with Ellison Dynamics, screens listing indices, a revolving door swallowing futures. She felt humiliation flare and pass like a fever. Pride said leave. Discipline said breathe. He had thrown away paper, not worth. Still, her hands trembled as she stepped toward the exit. Upstairs, the glass palace cracked. Phones shrieked in overlapping tones, a chorus of emergency. An assistant burst into the CEO's office without knocking, face drained of color. "Grant, Tokyo is on the line again, Berlin after them. The consortium is threatening to walk unless we resolve all of it." He looked bored until she added, "The interpreters ate from the same catered tray. Food poisoning. Every one of them." His boredom evaporated. The billion-dollar acquisition, his crown jewel, the press release already drafted, was now a countdown with no numbers. He snapped orders that stumbled over each other. "Get a backup service. Any freelancer. Anyone who can listen." The answer came back in echoes. "Unavailable. Out sick. Out of town. Out of time." 7 nations, 7 languages, 7 ways to lose face on the same afternoon. Grant pinched the bridge of his nose. His grandfather's portrait stared down from the wall. Hard jaw, hard century. The lesson had always been simple: money buys fluency. Today, money was nauseous on a hospital floor. Down in the lobby, Zara heard the panic before she saw its source. The elevator doors slid open and a wave of hurried voices spilled into the atrium. Rapid Japanese on speaker, clipped German from a phone, anxious Portuguese threading through it all. The sound triggered muscle memory: a Kyoto kitchen at dawn, a Berlin train announcement, a Sao Paulo vendor haggling with joy. Language is not words, she thought. It's weight distribution. It's how a sentence bows when respect enters the room. She should leave. She had rent to worry about, a voicemail from her mother that said, "Call me when you eat," and a bus schedule highlighted in yellow because late buses get you late to life. But something, maybe the way the assistant's voice broke, maybe the childish pettiness of a resume in a trash bin, kept her feet rooted. A door to the executive hall stood ajar. Through it came a flood of agitated syllables from Tokyo, tripping over legal terms as if running downhill. Zara moved, not with permission, but with purpose. The assistant nearly collided with her, eyes wide. "You can't. I can help," Zara said softly, already glancing at the phone screen. "He's not angry at the numbers. He's angry at the ritual you skipped." The assistant blinked as if someone had opened a window in a locked room. "Who are you?" "Someone you screened out." Inside, Grant stood at the head of a long table, untethered for the first time in years. The Japanese executive on speaker was speaking quickly, vowels compressed into urgency. Grant mistook speed for hostility. "Tell him we're offering the same terms," he hissed, as if volume could translate shame into consensus. Zara stepped to the edge of the table. "He's not asking for terms," she murmured. "He's asking for face." You moved a ceremonial step to the end of the process. It belongs at the beginning. To him, you inverted the ladder. The room's oxygen shifted. A few heads turned, most stared. Grant studied her like a problem he hadn't known existed. "And you are the woman whose resume you bend." She didn't flinch. "May I?" Without waiting, she addressed the speaker in polished Japanese, calm cadence. respectful honorifics, the precise humility that invites a bridge to lower itself. The voice on the line softened into the deeper register of relief. Zara listened, answered, mirrored, adjusted. She did not merely translate words. She realigned dignity. The conference phone began to glow with incoming calls stacked like storm clouds. Berlin, Casablanca, Moscow, Sao Paulo, Beijing, Rome. The interpreter network was truly down. The deal spine was kinked in 6 places. Grant, who could sell satellites with a toast, found himself mute where it mattered. He gestured helplessly at the device. Can you? If you want the truth, she said, I can carry it across. She moved through languages the way dancers move through light. German with its crisp fences, Portuguese with its swinging gait, Arabic like a courtyard where respect enters first. She flagged a compliance snag the legal team had mislabeled, named a banking principle they had never heard pronounced correctly, and caught a Mandarin idiom whose literal meaning would have detonated goodwill. The room watched incredulously as hostility thinned to caution, then to curiosity. Somewhere in the middle of saving his crown jewel, she became the hinge on which his entire building turned. Grant's gaze fell, finally, on the trash bin by his desk. Coffee ring, paper edges, the small arrogance of waste. He swallowed what pride hadn't already been scorched by urgency. Miss Monroe, is it? Yes. Don't leave. She did not smile. That depends on whether you plan to listen. Outside, the city still pulsed with indifference. Inside, a door the size of a career swung open on quiet hinges. For the first time all day, the clock on the wall seemed to slow, making space for something heavier than panic. Respect, arriving late but dressed for permanence. And as the next call lit up the phone, Berlin this time, impatient but salvageable, Zara tightened her ponytail, squared her shoulders, and prepared to do what rooms like this never expect. Rewrite the script without asking for a pen. The office that had once felt like a kingdom now sounded like a battlefield. Phones rang, voices clashed, and every second carried the weight of $1 billion disaster. Grant Ellison stood in the center of it, stripped of his usual confidence, watching chaos multiply. The Yamamoto Consortium, the jewel of his international portfolio, had just suspended negotiations. Their polite but firm message had cut like a blade. We question Sterling's cultural understanding and respect for partnership. Those words alone were enough to send investors into panic mode. Zara, standing quietly by the glass wall, could feel the tension like static in the air. She hadn't planned to stay. She could have left with her dignity barely intact, maybe even with a story to laugh about later. But now, watching the company unravel over the simplest of cultural missteps, she realized how fragile arrogance really was. The empire that had dismissed her was crumbling from the inside, and the only person who could stop it was the girl whose resume lay at the bottom of a trash can. Amanda, the exhausted assistant, turned toward Zara like a drowning woman spotting land. Do you really understand them? All of them. Zara nodded once. 9 languages. Japanese is one of them. Then, please, Amanda whispered, help him before this entire building turns into dust. Grant didn't even look up when Zara approached the table again. He was too busy arguing with a translator app that butchered every sentence it tried to fix. Tell them the clause is non-negotiable, he barked. Zara's voice sliced through the room, calm but firm. If you say that, you'll lose the deal entirely. In Japan, negotiations aren't battles, they're dances. You skipped the bow, Mr. Ellison, and stepped on your partner's feet. The CEO's glare met hers with pure disbelief. But he didn't interrupt when she switched languages and addressed the Tokyo delegates herself. Within minutes, the storm on the other side of the world began to quiet. Her words flowed with grace and precision, weaving apology and strategy together. Grant watched as her tones softened the tension in the voices coming through the speaker. When she finally ended the call, the silence in the room was deafening. They've agreed to reconvene, she said simply. But they want a new point of contact. Someone who understands their traditions. She looked straight at him. Someone like me. For the first time in his career, Grant didn't have an answer. He'd built his success on confidence, on the illusion that money and intellect were enough. But this young woman who spoke to foreign executives with effortless authority, made him realize how limited his world truly was. Who exactly are you? He asked, his tone uncharacteristically cautious. Zara Monroe, she replied. Summa cum laude, Howard University. Consultant for cultural integration projects across 7 countries. The woman you told security to escort out. Amanda let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Grant, to his credit, didn't argue. The truth was right in front of him, as undeniable as the panic still flickering through the phones. He gestured toward the empty seat beside him. Sit, he said. We've got more calls coming. Zara didn't hesitate. One by one, the screens lit up with faces from every corner of the globe. German executives with rigid expressions, Brazilian partners full of wounded pride, Moroccan bankers looking insulted, and a Chinese delegation whose silence was sharper than any reprimand. It was a global tribunal, and Grant sat as the defendant. Every voice accused him of arrogance, disguised as efficiency. Every complaint exposed years of cultural blindness. Zara listened carefully, letting the frustration pour out. Then, one language at a time, she answered, calm, professional, and deeply human. She didn't just translate, she rebuilt bridges in real time. To the Germans, she clarified regulatory misunderstandings. To the Brazilians, she apologized for the lack of respect during calls. To the Moroccans, she explained adjustments that would align with Islamic financial ethics. Her mastery wasn't mechanical, it was emotional intelligence turned into diplomacy. By the time she finished, the same executives who had been ready to abandon Ellison Dynamics were now asking for future meetings, proposing even larger investments. Grant leaned back, the realization settling over him like a cold tide. The girl he had mocked had just saved him from ruin. When the final call ended, the room remained frozen for a long, fragile moment. The hum of the city outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Grant exhaled shakily. You just prevented the biggest disaster in my company's history, he admitted. And I threw you out like garbage. His words weren't dramatic. They were exhausted, hollow, sincere. Zara looked at him steadily. Maybe next time, you'll read what you throw away. Amanda's phone buzzed again, emails pouring in from the global branches, each one confirming renewed interest in the partnership. It was over for now. The crisis had passed, but its message lingered. Ignorance costs more than failure ever could. Zara gathered her things quietly, ready to leave. Where are you going? Grant asked. Home, she said. You have a lot to fix. I've done my part. But as she turned toward the door, his voice followed her. Wait, he said, softer now. You've done more in one afternoon than most of my senior team has done in a year. Stay, at least until I understand what I've been blind to. Zara paused. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let him drown in the mess he'd made. But another part, the one that had learned languages not from privilege but from necessity, understood the opportunity before her. Not for him, but for everyone like her who had ever been told they didn't belong in rooms like this. Fine, she said. But I don't work for people who don't listen. If you want my help, you follow my lead. Grant nodded, swallowing his pride like broken glass. Deal. Outside the glass walls, the skyline glowed in sunset hues, gold over steel, light over arrogance. And somewhere between pride and apology, a new chapter began, quietly rewriting the rules of power and respect. At BY Morning, the headlines were brutal. Ellison Empire near collapse after global miscommunication. $1 billion deal on the brink. Grant Ellison had been reduced from business prodigy to cautionary tale overnight. But in the quiet hours before dawn, one person was still in his building, Zara Monroe, sitting in the same conference room that had humiliated her the day before. Papers surrounded her like a battlefield of languages and laws, each sheet marked with notes in ink so neat it looked printed. Amanda entered with 2 coffees, one of them trembling in her hand. You didn't sleep, she said softly. Neither did the markets, Zara replied, without looking up. If we don't restructure the communication flow before Japan wakes up, this deal collapses again. Cultural damage doesn't vanish overnight. She looked up finally. But it can heal, with structure. By 8 a.m., the senior team filed in, bleary-eyed and defensive. They didn't know what to make of the young woman sitting at the head of the table, a stack of multilingual documents beside her. Grant stood at the opposite end, unusually quiet. This, he began, is Miss Monroe. She's the reason you still have a company to work for. A few polite nods followed, forced, uncomfortable. One of the executives, Webb, couldn't help himself. With respect, sir, she's not an employee. Why is she here? Zara met his stare evenly. Because your billion-dollar partners don't trust you anymore. They trust me. The room stiffened. Yesterday, you offended 4 cultures and violated 2 international compliance standards, she continued. You thought efficiency meant cutting corners. In global business, it means cutting respect. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Grant gestured toward the screen where global partners were already waiting. Show them how it's done, he said simply. The first call came from Germany, stern voices questioning contractual frameworks. Zara switched to fluent German, outlining legal clarifications their own attorneys had missed. Next came Brazil, where she apologized with poetic grace for past cultural slights, her words wrapped in empathy that felt real, not rehearsed. Then Morocco, Russia, and China, all handled with composure so absolute that even Webb stopped sneering. As each misunderstanding unraveled under her voice, the impossible began to happen. Fractured partnerships started mending themselves. Emails pinged with confirmations. A once-doomed deal was suddenly alive. When the last call ended, Grant turned toward her, a different man. You just saved us twice, he said quietly. Zara closed her notebook. No, Mr. Ellison. I just showed you what listening looks like. She stood to leave, but Amanda stopped her. You're not going back to that lobby, are you? Zara hesitated. Not today. Hours later, Grant called her back into his office. Gone was the arrogance that had once filled this space. The air now carried humility, maybe even gratitude. He motioned toward the framed portrait of his grandfather. He built this company believing dominance was the language of success, he said. I copied him. But watching you today, I realized dominance doesn't build partnerships. Understanding does. He reached into his drawer and pulled out her crumpled resume, carefully smoothed flat. You deserve more than an apology. Zara crossed her arms. I don't need your pity. Not pity, he said, shaking his head. Perspective. I'm offering you a new role, Director of Cultural Strategy. Full authority to reform how this company operates globally. She blinked, uncertain if he was serious. Why me? Because you see what the rest of us never did. Because you don't treat people as problems to solve, but as worlds to understand. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. If I accept, I want conditions. Grant smiled faintly. You're negotiating already. Go on. First, she said, you build a team of real talent, not just the same faces in different suits. Second, we create training for every executive, mandatory. No more pretending culture is a checkbox. He nodded. Done. And third, she added, we don't hide what happened. We use it as an example. You tell the truth, publicly. No spin. Grant exhaled slowly. You realize you're asking me to admit I was wrong in front of the entire board? Zara's voice was steady. Exactly. That's where real leadership starts. He studied her for a long time before finally extending his hand. Then it's a deal. Zara shook it firmly. She had walked into this building as a dismissed applicant and now stood as the architect of its redemption. Yet her expression stayed calm. I'll start tomorrow, she said. Tonight, I have a train to catch, and a mother to tell that her daughter finally got the job she deserved. As she stepped out into the fading city light, she caught her reflection in the marble lobby once more. It was the same girl who'd arrived humiliated, but now the air around her carried power, quiet and undeniable. Upstairs, Grant stared at the framed resume on his desk. The coffee stains remained, but they looked almost sacred now. Proof that even arrogance can be educated. For the first time in years, he smiled not with victory, but with humility. The company would change. The world, maybe too. Outside, Zara lifted her face toward the skyline. The city that once ignored her now glittered like applause. She whispered to herself in quiet triumph. Now, they'll listen. The next morning, Ellison Dynamics woke up to a different rhythm. The same offices that once echoed with superiority now hummed with tension and curiosity. Whispers followed Zara Monroe as she walked through the marble corridors, some admiring, some skeptical, many disbelieving. The woman who had been escorted out by security 2 days ago now had her own office on the top floor, a title longer than most employees' careers, Director of Cultural Strategy and Global Integration. Grant Ellison watched from behind the glass wall of his office, arms folded. He had built this empire believing fear inspired excellence. Now, he was about to see whether respect could do the same. Zara spent her first hours studying the company's structure, org charts, contracts, and cross-cultural correspondence that read more like demands than discussions. Every email screamed the same tone: "We know better." The arrogance was baked into the system. She highlighted line after line of phrasing that alienated their partners. Phrases like final authority, standard compliance, American model preferred. Each one, she realized, was a quiet insult masquerading as professionalism. At noon, she called her first internal meeting with all department heads. 20 men in tailored suits and 4 women who looked like they'd stopped breathing halfway up the corporate ladder filled the boardroom. Grant entered last, intentionally taking a seat beside her, not at the head of the table. The message was clear. This was her meeting. Zara began without slides or small talk. "I'm not here to decorate your diversity reports," she said plainly. "I'm here to teach you how not to destroy your own success." A few eyebrows rose. "Yesterday, we nearly lost a $1 billion deal because this company speaks only one language: arrogance. That ends today." Webb, the senior VP, leaned back with a smirk. "So you're saying a few translation tweaks will fix the global economy?" Zara's gaze didn't waver. "No, I'm saying humility will." A ripple of laughter followed, but she ignored it. "Let's start with your communication patterns." She clicked open a projection of the company's latest correspondence with the Japanese and German partners. Every line here violates cultural norms, interrupting hierarchies, dismissing rituals, assuming our standards are superior. This isn't efficiency. It's colonial arrogance disguised as corporate speed. Grant watched his executives shift uncomfortably as Zara dissected their emails one by one, turning every sentence into a lesson. Within 30 minutes, the laughter was gone, replaced by silence. Even Webb stopped smiling when she translated the subtext of his last negotiation. How one careless phrase had implied that the German partner's legal concerns were unnecessary bureaucracy. By the end of the session, nobody dared interrupt her. When she finished, Grant spoke for the first time. "You just got a masterclass for free," he said. "Listen to her. She's the reason we still have partners left." After the meeting, the tension in the building thickened. Some admired her boldness. Others called it insubordination in heels. But Zara didn't care about opinions, only results. She stayed in her office until midnight drafting a document she called the Cultural Integration Framework. It wasn't just about etiquette, it was a blueprint for a new way of doing global business. It balanced Japanese patience with German precision, Russian formality with Brazilian warmth, Moroccan ethics with Chinese pragmatism. It wasn't a compromise, it was harmony. When she presented it to Grant the next morning, he read the first few pages in silence. "You're rewriting the foundation of international corporate relations," he said finally. "Exactly," Zara replied. "If we can make this work, we won't just rebuild trust. We'll redefine leadership." But change, she soon discovered, doesn't come quietly. Within days, resistance surfaced. Webb gathered a few loyal executives, whispering about a takeover in disguise. They claimed she was exploiting guilt to climb the ladder. One memo even called her a diversity experiment. It reached her desk within hours. She didn't confront them immediately. She preferred proof to anger. When the next round of global calls came in, she handled them herself, with Webb and his allies present. Within 20 minutes, she had corrected 5 negotiation errors that could have cost millions. The executives who had mocked her earlier now stared in stunned silence as their experiment saved them yet again. Grant glanced at Webb afterward, voice cool. "Next time you question her leadership, remember who actually runs the room." That night, as the building emptied, Zara sat alone at her desk overlooking the city lights. Her exhaustion was heavy, but her conviction burned brighter. She knew this wasn't just about business. It was about rewriting every unspoken rule that had kept people like her out of power for generations. Her phone buzzed with a message from Carmen, the cleaning supervisor she'd met days earlier. "Saw your name in the newsletter. You're making us proud. Remember, paper flowers don't wilt when watered with purpose." Zara smiled, running her fingers over the origami flower still sitting on her desk. When she finally left the building, dawn was breaking over the skyline. The mirrored glass of Ellison Dynamics reflected the sunrise in gold, a tower of pride learning, slowly, to glow with humility. Inside those walls, power was shifting. Respect was becoming the new language. And the woman they had once thrown away was now teaching the world how to listen. 2 weeks later, Ellison Dynamics was standing at the edge of history again. But this time, the danger wasn't ignorance. It was pride, still lurking like a parasite in the company's bloodstream. Zara Monroe had done the impossible, restored the billion-dollar deal, earned the board's reluctant approval, and convinced international partners that cultural respect was more than a slogan. But transformation, she knew, is never a straight line. It's a war fought in silence, hallway whispers, and corporate politics dressed as progress. Grant Ellison had changed, or at least, he was trying. His daily routine had shifted from commanding to listening. He attended Zara's cultural briefings without speaking, took notes during translation sessions, and even began greeting foreign delegates in their native tongues. Yet the old guard watched him with disbelief, unsure if their once-feared leader had gone soft. Then came the breaking point. It began with a simple oversight. A German executive emailed his Japanese counterpart without copying Zara's integration office. The message, though professional, ignored honorifics and hierarchical greetings. Within hours, what should have been a friendly follow-up turned into diplomatic chaos. The Japanese team, feeling disrespected, froze all communication. The Germans blamed misinterpretation, and the rest of the partners, hearing the commotion, started reconsidering the fragile network Zara had built. By 3 p.m., the crisis had reached the top floor. Amanda stormed into Grant's office, pale with panic. They're calling it the Tokyo-Bremen breakdown. The press is sniffing around again. We're hemorrhaging trust. Grant's hands tightened around his pen. Where's Zara? He didn't have to ask twice. She was already in the war room, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by monitors displaying live feeds from Tokyo, Berlin, Moscow, and Sao Paulo. The tension was suffocating. All right, she said, voice steady. Let's start with what went wrong. Webb, as usual, was the first to defend himself. This is overreaction. A misplaced title in an email doesn't justify freezing a billion-dollar deal. Zara's tone hardened. It's not about titles. It's about dignity. You don't just represent this company. You represent its respect for the people it works with. You've been treating partnerships like transactions. That's why they don't trust you. Grant entered, saying nothing, just standing beside her. For the first time, he wasn't the leader, he was the student. Within minutes, Zara had pulled the transcript of the exchange. She translated line by line, explaining the unspoken meanings, the quiet cultural codes that executives like Webb could never see. To the Japanese, a greeting is a promise of mutual honor, she explained. When you skipped it, you didn't save time, you erased respect. Webb's jaw tightened. So what now? You'll fix this with a speech. Zara's eyes flashed. No, with understanding. She turned to the screen and began speaking in flawless Japanese, her tone composed but firm. The executives on the other end softened almost immediately. Then, without missing a beat, she switched to German, translating both sides, weaving apology and clarity into a bridge stronger than any contract. It was breathtaking to watch. Within 20 minutes, what had begun as a cultural collapse transformed into a new pact of trust. The German and Japanese partners even proposed a joint training seminar, led by Zara herself, to establish unified communication standards. When the call ended, applause broke out spontaneously, from Grant's team, not the partners. Webb sat silent, humbled. Later, in Grant's office, the weight of the day settled. You did it again, he said quietly. Zara shook her head. We did it. But this can't keep happening. You can't rely on me to translate every problem. You need to change the culture from the inside. Grant nodded slowly. Then help me build that. That night, they worked side by side drafting what would become the most ambitious project in the company's history, the Global Harmony Charter. A binding agreement that would require every department, every executive, and every deal to undergo cultural empathy audits before approval. It wasn't just policy, it was revolution. When Zara presented the draft to the board the next morning, resistance erupted instantly. You're asking us to rewrite how we do business, one director barked. You're asking us to slow down. Zara's voice didn't rise. No, I'm asking you to evolve. She pointed to a slide showing their latest analytics. In the past month, partner satisfaction increased by 83%. Revenues rose 40%. Respect isn't slowing us down, It's saving us. Grant stood beside her and added, "She's right. We've been running fast in the wrong direction for years. It's time we learn to walk with others." By the end of the meeting, the vote passed, barely. But it passed. News spread quickly through the corporate world. Ellison Dynamics launches Global Cultural Transformation Initiative. Some mocked it. Others called it visionary. Within a week, Fortune, Bloomberg, and international networks were demanding interviews. For the first time, the company's narrative wasn't about arrogance. It was about redemption. Yet amid the praise, Zara remained grounded. Late one night, she found Carmen polishing the marble floors outside the boardroom. The older woman smiled knowingly. "Looks like they're finally listening to you, Querida." Zara smiled softly. "Maybe, but it's not just me they're hearing anymore. It's us." She handed Carmen a printed copy of the Global Harmony Charter, signed and sealed. "Read it when you get home," she said. "Page 7 is about recognizing hidden talent. I wrote that because of you." Carmen's eyes shimmered with pride. "Then maybe I'll keep it forever," she whispered. When Zara returned to her office, she found a note waiting on her desk in Grant's handwriting. "Tomorrow, you're presenting the charter to the shareholders. They need to hear it from the woman who made it possible." She leaned back, staring out at the glittering city that had once ignored her. Somewhere below, the lights of late-night cleaners reflected like constellations, tiny, tireless, unseen. And for the first time, she felt ready to shine for them all. Tomorrow, she would stand on the biggest stage of her life, not to prove herself anymore, but to prove that dignity and intelligence could rewrite the world of business forever. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel glimmered with chandeliers and ambition. Every seat was taken. Executives, investors, journalists, and scholars from around the world filled the air with murmurs of expectation. The Ellison Dynamics Annual Shareholders Summit had never attracted such global attention, but this time, the focus wasn't on profit margins. It was on the woman whose name had transformed from the dismissed applicant into a symbol of modern leadership, Zara Monroe. Backstage, she stood quietly, fingertips resting on the podium notes she had rewritten a dozen times. Across the curtain, Grant Ellison addressed the audience with the humility of a man reborn. "A month ago," he began, voice steady, "I made the most expensive mistake of my career. I dismissed someone not because of her skill, but because of my blindness. That mistake nearly destroyed my company, and it saved me." The crowd leaned in. "Today, I want to introduce the person who taught me what leadership truly means." When Zara walked onto the stage, the applause was hesitant at first, then grew into thunder. She stood under the lights, calm yet commanding, her presence radiating a quiet power. Behind her, a giant screen displayed a single image, her coffee-stained resume, framed beside the Ellison Global emblem. "This," she began, her voice clear as crystal, "is where my qualifications ended up 35 days ago. In a trash can. 9 languages, 2 degrees, a decade of experience. Dismissed because they didn't fit someone's idea of power." She paused, letting the silence fill the room. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because the world wastes brilliance every day in the same way." She clicked the remote. The next slide showed portraits of people once overlooked: Carmen in a lab coat, Miguel presenting in a boardroom, Fatu leading a business summit. Carmen was a janitor here for 8 years. Today, she runs our environmental compliance division. Miguel worked security. Now, he leads our Latin American partnerships. Fatu served in the cafeteria. Today, she oversees our African market expansion. Talent doesn't wear a uniform. It speaks through opportunity. Grant, watching from the wings, felt something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Pride not in himself, but in progress. Zara continued, her words rhythmic, almost like music. "Our Global Harmony Charter isn't a diversity campaign. It's a business evolution. In 30 days, partner trust rose by 83%. Revenue increased 40%. We've avoided 7 international disputes because respect is the world's most profitable language." The crowd erupted in applause again, but she lifted a hand gently. "Numbers matter, but hearts matter more." Behind every success are people who were invisible until someone chose to see them. Then she clicked to the final slide, a quote written in 9 languages. "Excellence has no nationality." Her voice softened. "If you take one thing from this room tonight, let it be this. When we stop judging potential by origin, accent, or background, we unlock genius. I stand here not as a miracle, but as proof that empathy is strategy. The hall went still. Then, slowly, everyone rose. A standing ovation rolled through the room like thunder breaking across glass. Grant stepped beside her, holding a glass plaque. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am honored to present the first Ellison Global Cultural Innovation Award to the woman who saved our company and redefined our future, Ms. Zara Monroe." The cameras flashed. For a moment, Zara felt the world tilt. The girl once invisible was now the face of a revolution. She smiled, but her thoughts drifted to Carmen's paper flower, tucked into her jacket pocket. It reminded her that this victory wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every unseen worker, every underestimated voice, every resume ever thrown away without being read. Weeks later, the headlines told a new story. From rejection to revolution, Zara Monroe's framework redefines global business. Universities requested her lectures. International leaders sought her counsel. Her model, the Monroe Protocol, became a case study in leadership programs across 4 continents. Then came the invitation that changed everything, the United Nations Summit on Global Inclusion. When Zara took the podium in the Grand Assembly Hall of the UN, the world listened in every language. Flags from 193 countries surrounded her, a living mosaic of what she had always believed in: connection. "Excellencies, distinguished delegates," she began. "Today I want to talk about the world's most silent crisis, the loss of human potential. Every time we ignore ability because it doesn't fit our expectations, we commit quiet injustice. Talent is universal. Opportunity is not." Her presentation projected stark numbers. In 6 months, companies adopting her framework had discovered over 2,000 employees working below their qualifications, 2,000 forgotten innovators, thinkers, and builders. "We have been stepping over brilliance," she said softly, "not because we lacked it, but because we refused to see it." As she concluded, her voice carried the calm strength of conviction. The future isn't about competition between nations, it's about cooperation between minds. Excellence has no accent. Genius has no race. And respect, real respect, is the new global currency. The entire hall rose in applause. Delegates from every continent stood to honor her words. Reporters called it the speech that rewired the world of business. That evening, back in her office overlooking the city skyline, Zara placed the UN medal beside the framed resume Grant had gifted her. The 2 artifacts, one symbolizing rejection, the other recognition, stood together like bookends of destiny. Grant entered quietly, holding a cup of coffee. "You've done something I never thought possible," he said. "You turned my company into a classroom, and the world into your students." Zara smiled. "No, Grant. We turned failure into a translation of hope." On his desk sat Carmen's paper flower, now encased in crystal, glimmering under the light. Zara touched it gently. "Proof," she murmured, "that beauty never disappears. It just waits to be noticed." Outside, the city hummed with life, 100 languages blending into one great pulse of humanity. Somewhere, a janitor, a driver, a waitress, or a young student might be whispering in another tongue, dreaming of a chance. And because of one crumpled resume and one moment of courage, the world had learned how to listen.